Before Johnny Depp etched Winona Forever onto his skin and became Hollywood's most mysterious bad boy, there was another story, a story that few fans know and even fewer talk about. Long before the headlines, the courtroom battles, and the scandals that would follow him later in life, Johnny Depp was just a young actor trying to find his place in the chaos of 1980s Hollywood. And in that journey, he came achingly close to settling down, twice. That's right. Before Winona Ryder, before Kate Moss, before Vanessa Paradis, Johnny Depp was engaged to not one, but two women who nearly became his forever. They weren't fleeting flings or casual romances. These were deep, passionate love stories that defined his early years and shaped the way the world would see him, not only as an actor but as one of Hollywood's most fascinating lovers. The first was Sherilyn Fenn, a young actress who would later rise to fame in Twin Peaks. With her, Depp found a tender, artistic romance, quiet, grounded, almost domestic. They lived together, read books, shared music, and dreamed of a future far away from the blinding lights of Hollywood. For a moment, it looked like Depp had found his match, someone who understood the gentle, artistic soul beneath the brooding exterior. They even got engaged. But fame has a way of testing love, and as their careers pulled them in different directions, the fairytale began to fade. Then came Jennifer Grey, the breakout star of Dirty Dancing, America's sweetheart at the height of her fame. If Sherilyn was calm and steady, Jennifer was fire and whirlwind. Within just weeks of dating, Depp proposed. Their romance was hot, fast, and intoxicating, but also volatile. Depp's rising stardom and restless spirit clashed with Jennifer's desire for stability. Within months, their engagement collapsed, leaving heartbreak in its wake. This is the untold story of Johnny Depp's first great loves, the women he almost married before Winona Ryder, and how these passionate, doomed romances helped shape the Hollywood legend he would become. Johnny Depp's story doesn't begin in Hollywood. It begins in the quiet suburbs of Owensboro, Kentucky, where he was born in 1963, and later in Miramar, Florida, where his family settled. He was the youngest of 4 children, a shy kid who often felt like he didn't quite belong. What he did have, though, was a love for music. From a young age, Johnny found solace in the sound of his guitar. Music became his escape, his passion, and eventually his first dream. As a teenager, Johnny wasn't dreaming of red carpets or blockbuster films. He was dreaming of becoming a rock star. At just 12 years old, he received a guitar as a gift, and by the time he was in high school, he had formed a band with friends. They called themselves the Kids, and soon they were playing in local bars and clubs, chasing the rush of live performance. Depp wasn't a student who cared much for classrooms. He dropped out of high school at 16 to pursue music full-time. His teachers thought it was reckless. But for Johnny, it felt inevitable. In the early 1980s, the Kids packed up and moved to Los Angeles, the city of dreams. LA was buzzing with opportunity but also unforgiving to those who didn't make it big. The band hustled, playing gigs wherever they could, and even opened for established acts. But like so many young musicians, they struggled to make ends meet. Johnny worked odd jobs, selling ink pens over the phone, doing whatever it took to pay the rent. The dream of rock stardom was slipping further away. And then, as often happens in Hollywood, fate intervened. Johnny's roommate at the time was Nicolas Cage, an actor already gaining momentum in the industry. Cage noticed Depp's striking looks and suggested he try acting. At first, Depp brushed it off. He wasn't trained, he wasn't polished, and he still thought of himself as a musician. But Cage saw potential. With encouragement, Depp auditioned for a role in Wes Craven's horror film A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. The role wasn't glamorous. He played Glenn, the boyfriend who meets a grisly end in one of the film's most iconic death scenes, but it was enough to get Depp noticed. The movie became a horror classic, and though Depp's part was small, his face and presence left an impression. For the first time, the door to Hollywood cracked open. Yet, Depp still thought of acting as a side gig, a way to pay bills until music took off. He took bit parts in films like Private Resort and kept his ambitions modest. But in 1987, everything changed. He landed the role that would catapult him into stardom. Officer Tom Hansen in the television series 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street wasn't just a show, it was a cultural phenomenon. It focused on young-looking cops going undercover in high schools, tackling teen issues with a mix of drama and action. For audiences, Johnny Depp was the breakout star. With his chiseled jawline, dark eyes, and brooding presence, he became the poster boy for a new generation of teen idols. Posters of him were plastered on bedroom walls, his face graced teen magazines, and suddenly, Johnny Depp was famous. But fame came with a price. While millions of fans adored him, Johnny felt suffocated by the heartthrob label. He had never wanted to be a pretty face for teen magazines. Deep down, he longed for the kind of artistic respect he admired in actors like Marlon Brando and James Dean. He wanted to be taken seriously, to play unconventional roles, to stretch himself creatively. Instead, he found himself trapped in a role that, while making him famous, left him unfulfilled. This tension between fame and artistry would become a theme throughout Depp's career, and it began here, in the late 1980s. He would later say that 21 Jump Street felt like a prison, one he longed to break out of. Still, it gave him access, connections, and opportunities that a struggling musician could never have imagined. Meanwhile, Hollywood itself was shifting. The late 1980s were a time of neon lights, booming box offices, and an endless fascination with celebrity culture. Paparazzi chased stars from clubs like the Viper Room to premieres along Sunset Boulevard. Young actors and actresses were becoming tabloid sensations overnight. It was a culture where image was everything, and Johnny Depp had the kind of image that sold. But image and reality don't always match. For Depp, the rising tide of fame brought chaos as much as it brought glamour. He still carried the sensitivity of an artist, someone who wanted to explore, create, and feel deeply. That intensity made him magnetic to those around him, especially women. It was in this whirlwind, where a struggling musician had transformed into one of Hollywood's hottest young actors, that Johnny Depp's love life began to capture headlines. Fame didn't just bring him attention from casting directors or fans. It brought love, passion, and heartbreak in ways that would define him for decades to come. Before Winona Ryder, before Kate Moss, before Vanessa Paradis, two women would capture Depp's heart so completely that he nearly married them. These romances weren't tabloid inventions, they were real, raw, and deeply human. The first was Sherilyn Fenn, a rising actress with a quiet strength and artistry that mirrored Johnny's own. The second was Jennifer Grey, America's sweetheart, whose whirlwind romance with Depp turned from passion to chaos in less than a year. As Johnny's star rose higher, his love life grew more complicated. Hollywood's newest heartthrob was about to learn that passion, fame, and stability don't always coexist, and the women he loved would carry the weight of that lesson. By the late 1980s, Johnny Depp was living in Los Angeles, caught between his music dreams and his growing career as an actor. Fame was only beginning to knock at his door, but something else entered his life at just the right moment: love. Not the fleeting kind that Hollywood was famous for, but something genuine, intimate, and surprisingly grounded. Her name was Sherilyn Fenn. Sherilyn Fenn was unlike most of the women floating through the Hollywood scene at the time. Born in Detroit in 1964, she came from a musical family. Her mother had been part of a rock band, and her father managed bands as well. Artistic energy was in her blood, and she carried with her a sense of independence and creativity that would later shape her career. Though she was still at the start of her journey, she had already been noticed for her striking beauty. Big eyes, porcelain skin, and an aura that was at once mysterious and approachable. In just a few years, she would become a star through her unforgettable performance as Audrey Horne in Twin Peaks. But in the late 80s, she was simply another actor trying to make it, just like Johnny. The two met on the set of a student short film called Dummies. It was an unglamorous project, no red carpets, no magazine spreads, no big Hollywood studio behind it. Just young artists working for the sake of creativity. But for Johnny and Sherilyn, it was the perfect setting. Away from the glare of spotlights, they were free to see each other for who they truly were. And what they found was a rare connection. Their relationship blossomed quietly. There were no tabloid headlines, no staged photo ops for publicity. Instead, their love was deeply personal and private. They moved in together, creating a little sanctuary away from Hollywood's chaos. Their days weren't spent at flashy premieres or wild parties but at home, surrounded by books, records, and each other. Both had an artistic soul, and they thrived in each other's company. They would share music, talk about literature, watch films, and dream together. For Johnny, who was just beginning to feel the uncomfortable weight of fame, Sherilyn represented stability. She saw the person beneath the rising heartthrob image, the sensitive artist who had once been a small-town boy with nothing but a guitar. For Sherilyn, Johnny was not yet the global star he would become. He was simply her partner, someone she could trust, someone she could create a life with. Their love was intense, but it was also tender. Unlike some of the fiery, chaotic romances that would come later in Depp's life, this one had a sense of peace. They laughed, they lived simply, and they leaned on each other. It was in this environment that Depp made his first serious step toward commitment. He proposed. For the first time, Johnny Depp was engaged. The engagement was quiet, without much fanfare, but it was meaningful. For Depp, who was only in his mid-20s, it signaled how deeply he cared for Sherilyn. She was not just a girlfriend. She was a future, a possibility of a life beyond Hollywood. Friends of the couple would later say that Johnny and Sherilyn truly seemed in love, not in the superficial way so often seen in young Hollywood, but in a way that felt authentic and lasting. Yet, as is often the case in stories of young love, time and circumstance had other plans. Depp's career was taking off faster than he could control. With 21, Jump Street, he was suddenly thrust into a level of fame that made privacy nearly impossible. He was traveling more, working more, and being pulled into the relentless cycle of Hollywood promotion. Sherilyn, meanwhile, was on her own rise. By the end of the decade, she would land the role that defined her career, Audrey Horne in David Lynch's groundbreaking series Twin Peaks. What had once been a private world for just the two of them began to crack under the weight of ambition, opportunity, and distance. They were young, barely in their 20s, still figuring out who they were as individuals. Love was there, but timing wasn't on their side. Eventually, the engagement faded, and the relationship came to an end. It wasn't the explosive, scandalous kind of breakup that tabloids feed on. There were no betrayals, no public feuds. It was simply two young people realizing that their lives were pulling them in different directions. For Johnny, it was his first experience of losing something real. Sherilyn wasn't a passing fling. She was someone he had imagined a life with. Letting go of that dream left a mark on him, even if quietly. For Sherilyn, the breakup was not a source of bitterness. In interviews years later, she would speak of Johnny with warmth and affection. She described him as a very soft person, artistic, and loving. There was no resentment in her words, only acknowledgement of a love that mattered, even if it didn't last. What's most striking about Johnny and Sherilyn's relationship is how different it feels compared to the narratives that would later surround Depp's love life. There were no tattoos declaring eternal devotion, no tabloid scandals splashed across the front page. Just two young dreamers trying to hold on to each other while chasing their own futures. In many ways, it was the most normal love story of Depp's early years. Looking back, it's easy to see how this relationship shaped Johnny. It gave him his first taste of deep, committed love in Hollywood. It showed him that intimacy could exist outside of the spotlight, that it was possible to live simply, even as fame encroached. But it also showed him how fragile young love can be when both partners are being swept away by the unpredictable currents of their careers. When fans think of Johnny Depp's great romances, the first name that often comes to mind is Winona Ryder. But before Winona, before Kate Moss, there was Sherilyn Fenn, the first woman he ever promised forever to. And though their forever didn't come to pass, the imprint of that love never truly faded. As Sherilyn stepped into her own fame with Twin Peaks and Depp continued his climb toward superstardom, their paths diverged. But the tenderness of their story remains. It was the first great love of Johnny Depp's Hollywood life, and it would set the stage for everything that came after. By the late 1980s, Jennifer Grey was a household name. Just a year earlier, she had starred as Baby in Dirty Dancing, a film that had become a cultural phenomenon. Almost overnight, she went from being a working actress to Hollywood's sweetheart. Millions of fans adored her, not just for her beauty but for her natural warmth and relatability. She had that rare quality that made audiences feel like they knew her, like she was the girl next door who had somehow stepped into the spotlight. Amid her skyrocketing fame, Jennifer found herself introduced to a young actor whose career was also beginning to burn hot, Johnny Depp. The introduction came through her agent, a friend who thought the two would hit it off. And hit it off, they did. The attraction was immediate, electric. Johnny, with his brooding eyes and outsider aura, was the very definition of dangerous charm. Jennifer, with her girl-next-door innocence but sharp wit, was both his opposite and his complement. Together, they sparked a kind of passion that neither had experienced before. Within weeks, their romance was not just official but serious, so serious that Johnny proposed. Jennifer accepted, and suddenly, Depp was engaged for the second time in his young life. Their love was fast and intoxicating, the kind that sweeps people off their feet before they've had time to catch their breath. Friends described them as inseparable. They laughed together constantly, shared adventures, and reveled in the heat of their new connection. For Johnny, who was still adjusting to his rising fame from 21 Jump Street, Jennifer was both glamorous and grounding. For Jennifer, Johnny was excitement personified. Sexy, unpredictable, and thrilling to be around. But as quickly as the romance burned, cracks began to appear. Depp's rising fame brought with it an entourage of attention he wasn't prepared for. Paparazzi hounded him, fans mobbed him, and his discomfort with celebrity life often boiled over into self-destructive behavior. Jealousy crept into their relationship, fueled both by Johnny's insecurities and by the constant scrutiny they faced. Jennifer later wrote about this time in her memoir, and her reflections reveal a relationship that was as turbulent as it was passionate. She described Depp as wildly charismatic but also unstable, prone to jealousy and unpredictable moods. There were bar fights, heated arguments, and nights of emotional chaos. For Jennifer, who was seeking stability after the whirlwind of Dirty Dancing fame, the intensity of their romance began to feel unsafe, not physically, but emotionally. Despite the problems, Jennifer admitted that she loved him deeply. She spoke of how sweet and tender he could be, how magnetic his presence was, and how hard it was to walk away from that kind of love. But she also knew that the volatility couldn't be sustained. The joy and passion were always shadowed by drama and uncertainty. The breaking point came quietly, almost anticlimactically. Jennifer ended their engagement not with a dramatic confrontation but with a handwritten note. It was a simple, painful acknowledgement that the relationship wasn't working. She needed something more stable, something that Johnny, at that point in his life, simply couldn't provide. The timing of the breakup aligned almost perfectly with Johnny's meeting of Winona Ryder in 1989. Within weeks of ending things with Jennifer, Depp would fall head over heels for Winona, beginning the romance that would dominate headlines for years. For Jennifer, the breakup was devastating but necessary. For Johnny, it was just another turn in the whirlwind of his young love life. Looking back, Jennifer's reflections carry no bitterness. She has spoken about Johnny with a mixture of fondness and honesty, acknowledging both the love they shared and the challenges that made it impossible to last. She called their romance fun, sexy, and intense, but also too unstable to survive. In the grand tapestry of Johnny Depp's relationships, his time with Jennifer Grey often gets overshadowed by the epic saga of Winona Forever. Yet, their brief engagement reveals a lot about Depp at that stage of his life. He was searching for love, eager to commit, but also battling the demons of fame, insecurity, and immaturity. Jennifer was a mirror to both his best qualities, his charm, his passion, and his flaws: jealousy, volatility, and an inability to find balance. For Jennifer Grey, the whirlwind romance became just one chapter in a life filled with highs and lows. After her relationship with Depp ended, she went on to face career struggles, personal challenges, and eventually triumphs of her own, including her unforgettable win on Dancing with the Stars decades later. For Depp, her exit made way for his next great love story, one that would define him in the eyes of Hollywood and the public. It's tempting to view Jennifer and Johnny's romance as doomed from the start. They were both young, both navigating sudden fame, and both unprepared for the pressures that came with it. But perhaps that misses the point. For a brief, shining moment, they found something real in each other. A spark, a thrill, a whirlwind. And though it didn't last, it was part of the journey that shaped who they both became. Johnny Depp's engagement to Jennifer Grey may have ended in a note, but the echoes of that romance still linger in the story of his early love life. Before Winona, before the myth of the tortured romantic rebel was cemented, there was Jennifer, the Hollywood sweetheart who gave him both love and heartbreak in the span of a few short months. Johnny Depp's early romances with Sherilyn Fenn and Jennifer Grey might seem like two completely separate love stories, but when placed side by side, they form a pattern, one that would define much of Depp's life in love and in fame. Sherilyn represented the slow burn. Their love was rooted in art, creativity, and quiet companionship. They lived together, read books, shared music, and inspired each other's work. It was a relationship built on depth and intimacy, away from the glare of the spotlight. Sherilyn was calm, grounding, and steady. She nurtured Johnny's sensitive, artistic side, giving him a sense of stability at a time when his career was still forming. Jennifer, by contrast, was the whirlwind. Their romance caught fire instantly, an engagement within weeks, nights filled with laughter, sexiness, and electricity. It was intoxicating, a rush of emotions that carried them higher than either had been before. But with that rush came volatility. Jealousy, bar fights, and Johnny's unpredictable moods quickly turned their love story into something explosive. What Sherilyn provided in quiet tenderness, Jennifer embodied in chaotic passion. Taken together, these two romances reveal a truth about Johnny Depp. He was, and always has been, a man of extremes when it comes to love. He didn't do casual. He fell hard, fast, and deeply. Engagements came easily because he always seemed to be chasing forever. But sustaining forever, that was another story. Stability clashed with his restless spirit, while volatility fed his intensity but left destruction in its wake. This pattern foreshadowed the relationships that would follow. With Winona Ryder, he combined both sides of his romantic persona. Winona was young, innocent, and artistic, much like Sherilyn. Yet their relationship had the whirlwind quality of Jennifer's romance, complete with obsession, media frenzy, and a tattoo that would become legendary, Winona Forever. For the world, that tattoo symbolized Depp's ultimate declaration of love. For Johnny, it was the culmination of everything he had been searching for in a partner. But like the loves before, it burned brightly before collapsing under its own weight. With Kate Moss in the 1990s, the volatility returned. Their love was glamorous, wild, and often self-destructive. Tabloids couldn't get enough of them. Two beautiful rebels, smoking cigarettes, drinking champagne, and turning hotel rooms into battlegrounds. Friends said their passion was undeniable, but so were their fights. Much like his time with Jennifer Grey, Johnny was caught in a relationship fueled by intensity but haunted by instability. Then came Vanessa Paradis, the French actress and singer who provided something different. With her, Johnny found balance, perhaps echoing the grounding influence Sherilyn once offered. Their 14-year relationship gave him children, stability, and a sense of family. For a time, it seemed he had finally broken the pattern. Yet even that eventually unraveled, and Depp once again found himself in turbulent waters. And then, of course, there was Amber Heard. Their relationship would come to define his later years in ways far removed from the tender romances of his youth. What began as passion spiraled into accusations, legal battles, and one of the most publicized breakups in modern Hollywood. Looking back, it's hard not to see echoes of his earlier romances. The volatility of Jennifer, the stormy passion of Kate, and the restless search for something lasting that always seemed just out of reach. The media, for its part, played a crucial role in shaping the narrative of Johnny Depp as Hollywood's ultimate heartbreaker. From the moment he became famous, his love life was front-page news. Every romance was magnified, every breakup dissected, every engagement treated as a national event. Paparazzi followed him everywhere, documenting his passion as though it were public property. In many ways, Depp became a symbol of the brooding, tortured romantic, a man who loved deeply but could never quite find peace in love. Fans swooned over his intensity, but those who knew him understood the struggles beneath the surface. Insecurity, discomfort with fame, and a constant tug-of-war between his desire for intimacy and his fear of being trapped. The Winona Forever tattoo remains the most iconic symbol of that persona. It wasn't just ink on skin, it was a declaration, a promise, and ultimately, a reminder of how fleeting love could be. When he famously altered it to read Winona Forever after their breakup, it became a kind of dark punchline, proof that even Depp's grandest romantic gestures could end in irony. But beneath the humor was something poignant. A man who kept searching for permanence in a world where permanence rarely existed. If Sherilyn Fenn was the gentle muse, Jennifer Grey the whirlwind spark, and Winona Ryder the ultimate obsession, then together they formed the foundation of Johnny Depp's story as a lover. His later relationships, for all their complexities and scandals, can be traced back to those early years when he was still learning what love meant under the blinding light of fame. It's easy now, with decades of hindsight, to see the patterns. Depp wasn't just falling in love with women, he was falling in love with the very idea of love itself. He wanted it to save him, ground him, excite him, and inspire him all at once. Sometimes he found pieces of that. Rarely did he find the whole. Before the scandals, before the chaos, before courtrooms and headlines turned him into a caricature, there was simply Johnny, an artist, a dreamer, a young man falling in love over and over again. Hollywood in the 1980s was unlike any other era. It was a world defined by contradictions, neon lights and cigarette smoke, endless parties but also artistic risk-taking, tabloid scandals running parallel with groundbreaking film movements. On one hand, it was image-obsessed. Actors and actresses lived under the microscope of gossip magazines and paparazzi lenses. On the other hand, it was strangely experimental and free, a decade when young stars could try bold roles, challenge conventions, and redefine what stardom meant. Into this cultural melting pot stepped Johnny Depp, a young actor whose face alone could sell magazines but whose heart was never satisfied with the shallow trappings of celebrity. He wasn't the polished, all-American heartthrob that studios wanted him to be. He was something darker, more complex, a man drawn to the fringes of art and life. And it was in this charged atmosphere, of fame, expectation, and rebellion, that Depp's early romances unfolded. Sherilyn Fenn and Jennifer Grey may not be the names most people associate with Johnny Depp today. When fans talk about his love life, it's usually Winona Ryder, Kate Moss, or Amber Heard that dominate the conversation. But Sherilyn and Jennifer were there first. They were the women who loved him before he became a global icon, before the scandals and court cases, before the tattoos and the chaos. Their love stories are crucial because they reveal the foundation of who Johnny Depp was as a young man. Sensitive, passionate, reckless, and desperate for connection. Sherilyn, the thoughtful actress who would go on to star in Twin Peaks, gave Johnny a sense of intimacy and peace. Their relationship wasn't about Hollywood headlines but about two creative souls finding comfort in each other. They lived together, surrounded by books and music, nurturing each other's art. She represented a stability that Johnny would later chase but rarely sustain. Jennifer, the dirty dancing star who captured America's heart, brought something entirely different. Their relationship was a shot of adrenaline, fast, fiery, and impossible to ignore. She represented excitement, thrill, and the danger of being consumed by passion. Jennifer later admitted that while she loved Johnny, his volatility and jealousy made the relationship unsustainable. But in those months together, Depp experienced a kind of romance that was intoxicating, if ultimately destructive. Both women shaped him in profound ways. From Sherilyn, Johnny learned about the beauty of quiet connection, about how love can be a grounding force. From Jennifer, he learned the dangers of unchecked passion, about how fame and insecurity can poison even the most promising relationships. These lessons, carried into his later romances, explained so much about the man he became. When Johnny met Winona Ryder in 1989, he was already carrying the imprints of Sherilyn and Jennifer. With Winona, he tried to combine the two extremes, the tenderness of stability and the thrill of obsession. The result was a love story so iconic it became part of Hollywood legend. But without Sherilyn and Jennifer, there may never have been a Winona Forever. They prepared him, in their own ways, for that kind of love. It's easy to dismiss relationships that don't last as failures. But that's not how love works, especially in the lives of artists. Sherilyn and Jennifer weren't mistakes or stepping stones, they were chapters. Chapters in the making of Johnny Depp, the man and the actor. Each romance left behind echoes that influenced not only his personal life but his on-screen performances. His brooding intensity, his ability to portray characters with deep longing and vulnerability, came from real experiences, from real heartbreaks. And perhaps that's why these early romances still fascinate fans today. In a career filled with blockbusters, scandals, and reinventions, there is something pure and human about remembering Johnny before the chaos, before courtrooms and paparazzi turned him into a spectacle. Back when he was just a young man in love, writing notes, giving rings, and believing that forever was possible. The legacy of these love stories isn't in their endings but in what they reveal about Johnny Depp's journey. They remind us that even Hollywood icons are shaped by heartbreak and hope, by the women they love and the choices they make. Sherilyn Fenn and Jennifer Grey may not have married Johnny Depp, but they left fingerprints on his soul. And in turn, they became part of Hollywood history, woven into the mythology of a man who would become one of cinema's most enigmatic stars. In the end, Johnny Depp's early romances are more than just gossip from a bygone era. They are a window into a time when Hollywood was brighter, freer, and crueler all at once. They are a testament to the universal truth that love, whether lasting or fleeting, leaves marks that never fade. Before the scandals. Before the chaos. Before the world claimed him as its tortured romantic rebel. There was simply Johnny, falling in love, over and over again. Before the name Winona Ryder was forever etched into Johnny Depp's skin, and into Hollywood legend, there were two women who came first. Sherilyn Fenn, the thoughtful muse who gave him stability, and Jennifer Grey, the whirlwind who swept him up in passion. Two engagements, two promises of forever, both ended before they had the chance to become marriage. It would be easy to dismiss these stories as footnotes in Depp's larger-than-life career. After all, they're overshadowed by the tattoo, the tabloid storms, the later romances with Kate Moss, Vanessa Paradis, and Amber Heard. But when you look closer, Sherilyn and Jennifer reveal something more. They show us the foundation of who Johnny was before the chaos, an artist, a dreamer, a young man who dove headfirst into love with the same intensity he brought to his performances. Sherilyn Fenn offered a quiet kind of romance. Their 3 years together were not about headlines or parties but about shared creativity, books, and music. She grounded him at a time when Hollywood was just beginning to open its doors. Jennifer Grey, on the other hand, was fire and electricity. Their love was sexy, fast, and unforgettable, but also unstable, a reflection of Johnny's growing fame and inner turbulence. Both relationships ended, but not without leaving their mark. From Sherilyn, Johnny learned about the power of intimacy and stability. From Jennifer, he learned the danger of passion without balance. And from both, he carried forward a restless desire to find a love that could be both grounding and thrilling at once. By the time he met Winona Ryder, Johnny was already shaped by these experiences. The tenderness he showed her, the obsession that led him to ink Winona Forever on his arm, these were not born in a vacuum. They were the culmination of lessons learned from the women who came before. And maybe that's the heart of the story. Love isn't only about the ones who last a lifetime. Sometimes, the almosts matter just as much. The romances that don't end in marriage still shape us. They teach us who we are, what we need, and sometimes, what we cannot handle. They prepare us for the loves that follow, even if those, too, end in heartbreak. Johnny Depp's story is not just one of scandals or courtroom battles, nor even of his greatest on-screen performances. It is also the story of a man who kept searching for love in its purest form, sometimes finding pieces of it, sometimes watching it slip away. Sherilyn Fenn and Jennifer Grey remind us that behind every Hollywood icon is a human being, fragile, passionate, imperfect, just like the rest of us. Before Winona, before Kate, before the chaos, there were Sherilyn and Jennifer. And their love stories, though brief, will always be part of Johnny Depp's legacy. Because in the end, sometimes the almosts define us just as much as the forevers.